program, we've been exploring the origins, the complex origins, the variations, and the myths and legends of the Queen of the Night, the primal female, the first rebel, Lilith. And now we're going to examine Lilith's portrayal in art and literature, the Snake Woman. There are many, many examples, so I'm just going to give you some of my particular favorites. Let's start with art, sculpture. I'm going to get into two little-known sculptural relief styles from the Middle Ages. The first one is Luxuria. Now, Luxuria, it can be found in churches and cathedrals. It's a series of obscene images associated with nudity and snakes. Now, essentially, it's the powers of seduction, women's sensuous rule over men. The message is clear here. Female sexuality is filled with vice and lust, and can plunge a man into death and hell. Now, Lilith is connected to mermaids in this artistic style, but these mermaids are more serpentine than fishy. There's a certain duality involved in Luxuria. There's a lot of luxury on display, diamonds, scepters, mirrors, but this luxury is surrounded by personifications of the serpent girl, the treacherous pleasures of sex. The primary example of this is the cathedral in St. Croix. The serpents feed off the breasts of the mermaid. Quite startling, these images, so if you can, get a look at them. All right, let's move on to Synagoga, a series of anti-Semitic relief sculptures that can be found in the portals of churches and cathedrals. This is also around the 11th to 13th century. Synagoga is a symbol of the Hebrews and the Old Testament. Now, the woman in Synagoga is condemned, rejected. Her eyes are covered. She wears a veil or a bandage because she's blind to the truth of Christ. This is extremely anti-Semitic, and even though the art is beautiful, it's really quite offensive. But I highly recommend you get a look at it, because this is a very little-known artistic movement of the Middle Ages that's usually kept hidden now. No one wants to talk about it or look at it because it really is offensive. All right, but you need to see this, folks, so get a look at it. Now, the woman, as I mentioned, is condemned, rejected, because she's blind to the truth of Christ. Now, she's represented with the Jewish hat and yellow dress, and she's often shown as a murderess of children. Sometimes she's given talons on her feet or a snake's tail. This is an obvious reference to Lilith. Now, these can be found in places like Strasbourg and Cologne and Vienna. And as I mentioned, it's very anti-Semitic. The imagery is very offensive. But the art is startling. It's beautiful art, but with a not very pleasant message. All right, let's move on to painting. There's many, many examples. I'm just going to give you some of my favorites. Bronzino. This is the Mannerism style. Allegory with Venus and Cupid, which is around 1545, I believe. It's a persuasive visual testimony of the deceptive glamour of women. The ambiguous female in the painting is crouching behind the happy Puto, Cupid. She has a beautiful face, but she has a snake-scaled body, a serpent's tail, and dragon claws. Now, the message here is quite clear. There's a terrible price paid for lust and sex. All right, let's move on to the pre-Raphaelites, because the pre-Raphaelites love the femme fatale. They love dark hair, white flesh, luminous skin. They paint a series of mysterious, desirable images that manage to be beautiful, disturbing, and repellent, but never boring. Essentially, they're the first to use the femme fatale / Lilith as a feminist interpretation. Their paintings have a sense of religious trance and sexual ecstasy that break the bonds of Victorian sexual repression. The examples of this, primary examples, are Dante Gabriele Rossetti, his paintings Beatrix, Helen of Troy, and Persephone, and Edward Burns Jones, the Beguiling of Merlin, and Lady Without Mercy. Now, this artistic link to the Pre-Raphaelites is really the beginnings of the transformation from demoness to modern feminist hero. This is where it really starts. The Pre-Raphaelites are the starting point for Lilith's transformation. Now, let's move on. Let's go to John Collier, his painting Lilith, which is 1887, I believe. Now, he paints in the Pre-Raphaelite style, but he's not really a Pre-Raphaelite. Lilith is essentially mixed, intermingled with the Lamia and Eve. It's a beautiful, erotic, potent mix. Myths are blended. The enchantress myth is mingled, and the painting features a voluptuous standing nude whose ample body is enthroned by a huge snake's tail. It's a startling, beautiful painting, and I highly recommend you get a look at it. All right, let's move on. Kennison Cox, his painting Lilith, which is 1892. Now, he's an American. He's not a Pre-Raphaelite. He's not British. And Mr. Cox is influenced by Renaissance paintings. He mimics the enthroned Madonna/Virgin Goddess. Now, his painting has no Mary. Instead, it has a very fleshy, seated Lilith, whose naked body is entwined by a snake. The snake's forked tongue is caressing Lilith's parted lips. Now, Lilith here is a half-woman, half-serpent, encircling the tree of knowledge. The woman and snake become one. There's bodily incorporation in this erotic entanglement. It's a very dreamy, erotic, primordial female. It's an amazing painting. Please get a look at it. All right, I'm going to stop with the art because I'm getting far too much into this. And I could keep going for hours on this, so I'm going to move on to literature. Now, as I mentioned, there are many, many examples. We talked a little bit about the Greek myths and some of the literature from the classical period, Aristophanes and Sappho, but we're going to jump ahead to the Middle Ages. The epic poems of the Middle Ages, Beowulf, the 8th century, although some scholars believe it's more like the 6th century, but the copy we have, the extant copy we have, has been dated to the 8th century AD. This is an Anglo-Saxon Christian account of the never-ending cosmic struggle between good and evil. Now, Grendel, the monster's mother, is a noxious serpent woman who lives in a dark, dangerous cave. Now, she's a serpent woman, yet she manages to be seductive. Now, Beowulf is an influence on Spenser's Fairy Queen, which is 1609, I believe. In Spenser's tale, a Red Cross Templar Knight, a symbol of virtue and holiness, comes across a cave, a darksome hole in the labyrinth of the woods, and he comes across a woman called Error, a half-woman, half-serpent, in a cave with a massive tail. The tail is coiled and knotted and features poisonous darts. Now, Error has an evil brood. She gives birth to thousands of lonesome, monstrous children. The message in these epic poems is quite clear. The evil female. Man can lose himself physically, spiritually, morally in the seductive woman. All right. Now, both of these snake women in the epic poems are killed by the sword, the ultimate phallic weapon. All right. Let's move on. I want to get a little bit into John Milton, Paradise Lost. This is 1667, I believe. The personification of sin. Sin is a combination woman-serpent. Her face and torso are exquisitely beautiful, but her nether regions are foul and snake-like. She has a slithering tail. The message is the same here. Female sexuality can engulf, drown, and devour you. Now, these snake women in these epic poems are erotic, but passionless. It's the female pagan life force that flows eternally without shame and morality. Now, let's move on to the Gothic poets, because the Gothic poets love the dangerous seductress. They're enchanted with demon women. They find them both beautiful and contaminating. And Lilith haunts and illuminates these beautiful and mysterious poems. Now, Coleridge, for example, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, 1798 or so, a red-lipped, raven-haired ghoul with leprous white skin plays dice with death for the mariner's soul. Well, this is obviously Lilith. And Lilith also plays a part in his epic poem Kubla Khan, that's circa 1816. Lilith lurks in the savage chasm. Savage chasm. I wonder what that's symbolic of. A site of mystery and enchantment. All right, let's go to Keats. Keats' Lamia, the quasi-pagan poem, this is circa 1818, based on the ancient Greek myth. Now, the Lamia's beauty cannot disguise her danger. La Belle, the Woman Without Mercy, 1819. A young knight is seduced by a fairy woman. The fairy queen sleeps with him, then abandons him, and this longing for this enchantress wears out the soul of the young knight and destroys his life. Threatening female desirability, the snaky seductress, the enchantress, is usually extremely popular with the Gothic poets and Victorian writers. So let's move on to the Victorian writers. George MacDonald, his novel Lilith, 1895, exploits the erotic potential of the deadly eternal woman. Beauty is manipulative and deceitful. What differentiates the Victorian literature from the rest is that the enchantress suffers terrible inner struggles. It becomes an attribute of the enchantress, deep psychological pain, the hell of self-knowledge. Now, in the novel, in MacDonald's novel, Lilith has a cancerous wound that eats away at her side and withers her bosom. This wound is a personification, a symbol of her evil and her deep psychological pain. All right, H. Rider Haggard, She. This is 1897. Ayesha. This is, by the way, this is one of my favorite novels. I'm a big fan of H. Rider Haggard. I love his romantic fantasy novels and Lost Race novels, and I highly recommend that you read some of H. Rider Haggard's work. He is an often neglected and unappreciated writer, and I find him to be among the greatest writers ever. All right, enough of my commentary. Let's move on to Ayesha. Now, Ayesha is an immortal beauty, gifted with vast intelligence, irresistible sensuality, and ruthlessness. Now, this is a devastating combination that no mortal man can resist. Now, Ayesha, just like Lilith in MacDonald's novel, suffers centuries of inner torment, psychological agony. Like Lilith, she is immortal, powerful, charming, and hypnotic, and she wears a double-headed snake belt. I highly recommend you read this novel. It is a great novel. There are several filmed versions. The 1935 version with Randall Scott and Nigel Bruce is pretty good, but I highly recommend the 1965 Hammer film version with Ursula Andress. This is much truer to the novel. There's also a 1925 version that we put up online, an extremely rare film that we put up online on our Mysterious Angel archive, so you can get a look at it. Just go to our archive and you can see scenes from this classic silent film. All right, as I mentioned, Ayesha suffers inner torment. This deep psychological pain becomes an attribute of these ageless enchantresses. Now, Lilith finds her way into children's literature. C.S. Lewis, his Narnia novels, his 7 novels of Christian allegory, The Lion Aslan sings the empty land of Narnia into being, just like God, with divine words. This is circa 1950 or so. And evil / Lilith enters the land, and the terrible but beautiful Queen Jadis